ESS Biz Grants. This product was prepared to assist small businesses to be shown the grants that they might be able to apply for. There are about $5 billion worth of grants and government assistance available in Australia from all levels of government each year. And the key question that accountants need to consider is, are your clients receiving their fair share of these grants? So in this webinar today, we're going to look at what is ESS Biz Grants, how it works, and look at the type of reports that are produced. We basically commence with a client profile. There are 18 questions that enable us to identify the type of grants that your client might be interested in, and then we need to ask some additional questions on those grants that have initially been identified to try to conclusively prove that the client is indeed potentially eligible for a particular grant. The system then produces a report which you could utilize to have a discussion with your client about the grants that you have identified for them. The system has a link to the appropriate government department website so that you could log on direct to the website if you wished. So we believe ESS Biz Grants is a quick and easy solution to finding government grants for individual SMEs. This product was developed following a discussion with David Smith, the Managing Director of Smith Inc., who a few years ago was undertaking due diligence reviews of accountancy businesses for the Count organisation. And part of that process was David was conducting interviews with the clients of the accountancy firms that he was conducting reviews on. And what he found was that there were quite a number of clients who were dissatisfied with the amount of information they'd been supplied by their accountants relative to government grants. David knew that through ESS BIZTOOLS we'd already written papers on individual grants, and that I had a good knowledge of how grants work because for 10 years we'd had a contract with Oz Industry to be one of the 12 business advisors in Australia for the highly successful COMET program, Commercialising Emerging Technology, which is now part of Commercialisation Australia. So that's why we sat down and developed this product to make it easier for accountants to be able to identify grants. The key item identified by David Smith was we had to develop a product that didn't require accountants to become experts in the government grants. We're the ones that have become experts, and we're trying to deliver a product that you can utilise. Real Advantage Solutions, Tim Donovan is our computer programmer who has developed the material based on our commentary on the various grants. Tim has then made it work as a cloud technology product. So the sort of information that we're going to be requiring you to enter for your client, and this is entered once, it then needs to be updated on an annual basis, but not too many things should change. The corporate structure, turnovers are very important in grants. Many grants have got minimum turnovers or maximum turnovers. Employee numbers are important primarily for a number of state government grants around Australia. Location can be very important for some grants which specify particular locations, and indeed there are significant benefits for businesses located in remote and very remote location, and those location definitions are determined from the Australian health industry, from the health department's maps on locations, are the same maps that have been utilised by most of the other government departments. Expenditure is important for Enterprise Connect, which is arguably the largest grant available in Australia on a number of grants issued, and they have a concept that a business can be eligible if it's achieved a minimum financial figure, which can be either turnover or expenditure. So a company with a very low or indeed no sales could qualify for an Enterprise Connect grant if their expenditure exceeds the stated financial figure. Exports are important to know, so we can direct that particular business to particular export grants funded by the federal government and some state governments. Research and development is not only for the research and development tax rebate, but also is a lead into other grants such as Commercialisation Australia, which require a business to develop a new product, process or service. Type of business and industry are based on the Australian and New Zealand industrial classifications. It's very important that these two items are identified accurately, because that then conveys to us the type of grants that might be available. So the system will produce initially a possible grants list, which is called a pending list. You can then read some information about that particular grant, and depending on the answers, some grants will be moved by the system that your client is potentially eligible for that grant. There is a grant toolkit which contains papers and other articles and information on a particular grant, so that you can read that if you're required to get more knowledge on the grants, or you could print it to supply it to your client. And you can link back to the website of the government department to complete a grant application. So we just might move into the website. So this is the website for ESS Biz Grants. What we can do first of all is look at grants. So I've already logged on. So if you're going through looking at these grants and you wanted to know how the apprenticeship incentives mature age workers worked, you can just click on there and get a basic summary of how it works. If you wanted to know about the certain inputs to manufacturer, you can read about it. The clean technology grants are basically under review by the new federal government, so we won't even look at any of them at this stage. But if you want to know how the clothing and textile grants worked, there's a summary there of the grant benefits, so you could read that and have a look. But what we're going to do is move into a consideration of, let's go back to the beginning here, of a client profile. Now I've already partly completed a client profile for another demonstration we were doing a couple of days ago, so we're calling this the Eastern Steel Fabrication, and I'll just get it back to the beginning. So I established this customer as the Eastern Steel Fabrication Proprietary Limited. Now if you wished, you could put a reference number into here, because we are using cloud technology, and some of you might not like the idea that your client's name is going to be included in this information, but that's up to you. You then need to determine the type of entity that your client's business operates under. There's no doubt that companies are the most popular entity from a government grant basis, but some of these other entities can be eligible for some grants. Definitely not all of them, but some grants. Companies are eligible, as far as I can recall, in every grant that's available in Australia or the states or territories. The other questions there, do you export? So in this company, Eastern Steel Fabrication, we've said they export. They also import. And what those two questions are going to do is allow the system to identify grants that require those key ingredients, either exporters or importers. Number of employees is important. Some grants have a minimum number of employees and a few have maximum number of employees. Businesses will need an ABN. The system within ESS Biz Grants is that all that we have here are small, medium enterprises. If they haven't got an ABN, they will not be eligible for any of the grants that we have in this system. How many years has the business been operating? We're saying 13 years in this profile. There are various grants that require businesses to have been in business for 2, 3, maybe sometimes 4 years. Enterprise Connect, which I mentioned earlier, is the largest individual number of grants in Australia for small businesses. It has a requirement that the business has to be operating and have lodged 3 annual business activity statements. Annual turnover is important. We've got minimum and maximum, so you're undoubtedly familiar with research and development. There's a changing point at $20 million. Obviously, companies with turnovers up to $20 million can obtain a taxation rebate at 45%, and the companies with turnovers over $20 million obtain a deduction calculated at 40%, and there's differences in how they're treated. So turnover is a very important figure. Annual expenditure, I briefly mentioned what that was before. The question is listed there because Enterprise Connect is a grant that many accountants identify when they undertake these reviews as being suitable for clients, remembering that Enterprise Connect applies for 12 different industry groups with a fairly broad definition in each of those industry groups. So annual expenditure can be an important aspect. The businesses need to be registered for GST. This system does not apply for tax-exempt businesses or not-for-profits or charities. So if you answer that a business is tax-exempt, the system will not offer you any grants for that type of business. We want to know if the business is involved in research and development. We're not worried at this stage whether it's a company or an individual, because the system is going to review whether the client might be eligible for grants such as Commercialisation Australia, which in the first stages of an application do not concern themselves as to whether the applicant's an individual or a company. By the time an applicant is offered a grant under Commercialisation Australia, they have to be a company. But what we're trying to achieve here is if they've done some research and development, they may well be eligible for a Commercialisation Australia grant. The last question is about concerns about financial vulnerability. We are preparing version 2 of this program at present. We're slightly changing that wording, but it's a question from a bureaucrat's point of view, because if there are any concerns about financial vulnerability, the government will not fund any grants. They don't like headlines in newspapers or TV shows talking about a government grant having been given to an organisation that a week later the liquidators or receivers are appointed. So it's basically if there has been discussed the possibility of a liquidator or receiver being appointed. Now, I've moved on now, and by saving it, we've already completed the address of this business. So we've made it in Hawthorn in celebration of them winning the AFL Grand Final. The system had identified that the area that Hawthorn was located in. The system has reproduced the financial information. And we then had to decide on the business and industry profile. Now, on the businesses, they're the selections offered by the Australian and New Zealand standard industrial classifications, so you'd go through and look at those. We've already decided that this business is a manufacturer. If you wanted to go on and have a look at the Australian and New Zealand industrial classification, you can do so, and there is the information there now that you can go into and work your way through the various classifications to decide what type of business your client is in. What we have here is a list of the industry classifications, which you can go through and just highlight. You can have more than one business classification and more than one industry classification if you wish for a particular client. In version 2, we're changing this approach, and we're going to use the Taxation Office ANZIC codes, which are called the Australian industry codes, because we think that will allow us to more accurately zero in on a particular industry, because some of the definitions are very wide. For argument's sake, in manufacturing, you can have everything from food, beverages, cars, leather, clothing, steel fabrication. All sorts of businesses are described as manufacturing. So that definition is not wide enough, and that's why we want to use the tax office equivalent of the ANZIC codes to allow greater identification. So we've already done this. We've said it's a manufacturer. They're in the manufacturing industry. We now go into search. What we're going to do is, first of all, we have this pending grant list. Now, I mentioned before, we've already identified a number of grants out of this list that this particular client may have been eligible for. So we'll just pick out a couple more so you can see how the system works, and that's all we're trying to achieve here today. Let's pick on this Clean Technology Innovation Centre. Now, this is a grant that's operated by the Enterprise Connect program. It's available for manufacturing type businesses, so it's clean technology, so a manufacturer could well be involved. They could obtain a grant of up to $20,000 on tailored advisory services on a 50% subsidy basis, basically to do anything which will improve the business's performance. Now, that means there's $40,000 worth of work if they've received the full grant. Some of the activities that Enterprise Connect fund are tasks that can be attended to by accountants. So it's also a grant that there's a potential payback for the accounting firm if your client is happy to have you involved in undertaking that task. Now, the sort of work I've done in this area includes business plans, strategic plans, risk management analysis, human resources system, analysis of the debtors system, acting as the facilitator for management meetings over a 6-month period. So that's just giving you some idea of some of the work that if you had a client that was successful in this area, that you may be able to perform. Also, there are numerous other tasks that the money could be spent on. The client might want a new factory layout designed. It might be something to do with waste management. They might be looking at implementing various parts of the Kaizen management system. It's a whole range of services that would then be undertaken by other people to improve the performance. Enterprise Connect also has a Researchers in Business grant, whereby a business can obtain the assistance of a university graduate from a university or other specific organisation to assist in the implementation of a new process or product within the business. And that subsidy can be up to $50,000 on a 50% basis. So you've had a look at that, so you know a bit more about the grant. You can then look at the amounts of funding, which I basically already told you. If you wanted to, you could then go into the grant toolkit. And if you wanted to read a paper as to how Enterprise Connect works, our system, let's take this back to the beginning. Our system has a paper from ESS BIZTOOLS, which is a paper about the Enterprise Connect program, which you could read or you can make available to your client. And there's an interesting list. That's the list of industries that Enterprise Connect are currently supporting. And other than tourism, most of those definitions are very wide. So you can have draftsmen who are working in conjunction with manufacturing businesses eligible for the Enterprise Connect grant, as long as they've achieved the minimum turnover requirements. There are various other papers on these various industries which you can link to. So the paper is giving you a clear overview of how this grant program works, and you can see there some of these minimum turnovers or expenditure figures. If you wanted to have a look at a checklist on the grant for a university graduate, the $50,000 on a 50-50 basis, you can download a summary of how that particular aspect of that grant works. So it's there. There is a paper then deliberately on the clean energy side of the Enterprise Connect program. So if you wanted to know more about just the clean energy grant, because each of these grants are slightly different in their application, you can see there what it's targeted at: solar, wind, wave, tidal, low emission coal, biofuels, and the type of businesses that might be eligible for it. So there's this additional information to give you more ideas as to how the grant operates. But then we need to ask some additional questions, and I referred to these earlier. The system's originally done a search and said, this business is a manufacturer, it meets the turnover levels, because the turnover we had was $4.2 million. So the turnover requirements are 1.5. Obviously, we wouldn't have had this grant offered to us if the turnover was only $1.2 million. So we could have a look at this, and has the business previously received a business review funded by Enterprise Connect? Now, I'm deliberately going to answer this yes. What the system has said, we would be ineligible, because under the Enterprise Connect rules, you can only apply for the you can only be involved in business review once. So it's now told us we're ineligible. If we went back to results, what we would have there is, under potentially ineligible, we would have the Clean Technology Innovation Centre. If we go back to pending, and we'll just go back to that grant again, I got the wrong one there, sorry. I'll just go back. We click on the name of the grant again, it will take us back to where we were. I want to change that answer. I've realized I should have answered no. The system will then say that when it's going to keep us ineligible till we answer the rest of the questions now, because we started off. Is the applicant operating in the clean technology sector? So we look at all that and we say yes. Has the company operated in Australia and lodged business activity statements for the last 3 years? We say yes. Is the company's revenue or expenditure over $1.5 million? And we say yes. What it's now done is said we're now potentially eligible. It would have been saying eligible right through if I'd answered what we're now saying is the correct answer initially. So about 85% of the answers to be correct are yes, but some of them are no. So just don't go, if you're using our system, just don't go straight through and answering yes. If you wanted to, I've clicked on Apply Now. If we clicked on there, we would go to the Enterprise Connect website where we could look at lodging a application. If we now go back to results, we'll now find that under potentially eligible, we have a number of grants. In fact, because I've been playing with this before, we've now got 13, but amongst them is the Clean Technology Enterprise Centre, that one we just did, that's it there. But there are a few others which I've built up by just going through with another group in a webinar and at the Australian Technology Showcase in Brisbane last week. But I hope it serves the purpose just to show you how this system operates. If we then look at print report, this is the sort of report you would then get for your client. It would have the name of the client, Eastern Steel Fabrication Proprietary Limited. Prepared by would be the name of the accounting firm that is the licensee to use ESS Biz Grants. What you get in the report is a brief summary as to what is covered by this grant and what the grant funding is. There is a disclaimer on the bottom which is indicating that whilst all care has been taken, you are not guaranteeing to the client that they will receive a government grant, because they've got to go through the application process. So our suggestion is that you would produce this report to a client, have a conversation with them, ask them if they're happy to proceed with applications for these grants. The important question then is going to be, is the client going to go off and do these applications on their own, or do they want you to handle the applications, which would mean that you'd be opening a new account for the name of the client and billing them for the work to assist them to obtain the government grant or incentive that is available to them. And obviously that would probably then involve some discussions with various government officers to assist in the application process. Our suggestion is that this type of report could be produced every year by reviewing the client activities as part of the annual accounts preparation, or it could be prepared on a one-off inquiry by a client, or for that matter a non-client who has inquired as to whether they might be eligible for some government grants. So in summary, we believe that by being proactive in assisting your clients and other people who make inquiries of you to identify government grants that they may be eligible to apply for, is showing the client that you are truly an interested and concerned advisor for them, that you are assisting them to obtain money that as a taxpayer they're all paying for, and it will also open the opportunity to undertake work that is business advisory services work, whether it's preparation of a business plan, cash flow management review, debtor systems review, risk review, etc. So we see being proactive in government grants has been a great way to make an entry into undertaking business advisory services work for your clients. And based on the research that David Smith has conducted, we believe that your efforts in identifying these grants to your clients will be greatly appreciated by your clients.